Rabbi Yissocher. Tonight for parshas korach, we're going to begin with a tshuva on a certain ma'aseh that happened, and we're going to end with the end of the tshuva, and we are going to see how this fits into parshas korach. Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, who is a Gaon Olam and was a prolific writer. One of his svarim was Ha'elaf L'cha Shloimai, which is 1,000 shuvas that Rabbi Shlomo Kluger wrote. But he wrote other svarim as well. Sefer Shuvas Uvacharta B'chaim, Siman Pei Zayin, Shnas Tov Kuf Tzadi Vov. If my calculations are correct, that's 1836. What happened? Hinei hitzikani ruchi layuchal adama al chil shabbos asher mishpata keish brayer b'kirbi. He says, I'm writing this tshuva about a certain incident in which there was a chil shabbos. It's not the type of chil shabbos that we're accustomed to. This was a chil shabbos that was sanctioned by a paisek. Al hira hara hamkulkelas asher nasa b'kilaschem. There's a certain city, and there was somebody that was very ill in the city, very sick. So this paisek, al hayra, asher nas b'klasim b'shabbos over, asher hayra meira echad. It was a rov, a paisek. L'chal shabbos b'chil achar chilo. He was paskin to be mechal shabbos, lichtei b'shabbos kvittel. So those Rabbi Yissocher of you who are of Hasidic backgrounds, a kvittel, Rabbi Yissocher, is a little piece of paper in which you give to a rebbe or a tzaddik, an ish kadosh, that he should daven for the chayla. So a person who got ill on Shabbos, and they felt that the only way for him to get better is in fact for him to write a kvittel and to send the kvittel to the rebbe on Shabbos. So he paskin this Meira Hira, it's mashma that it was written by a Jew, and to take the Rebbe, whoever this was, we'll see who it was soon, to take the kvittel to the Rebbe who lived very chutz l'tchum, so not only did they write the kvittel, but they traveled chutz l'tchum on Shabbos, uvesusim shal Yehudim, and they used horses that belonged to a Jew. That's another infraction, because that's shvisas behemtai. Uveshlichus mos chutz l'chum, and they sent money. Asher gam l'fidaitam ha'yev shelamayit b'kama malachas. Even if they wanted to do this, they could have done this with less chol Shabbos. They could have sent a guy l'shach nachri. They sent another two Jews to another two Rebbes with a pidyon. A pidyon is, you give the Rebbe money for his tzedakos, and it's like a pidyon hanefesh. So the Rosh Shlomo Kluger writes, and he says, this thing is so wrong from the get-go. Even though pikuach nefesh is deiches Shabbos, to save a human life, you're allowed to be machal the Shabbos. But what do you want to do over here? Which means, if you have a person that's a cheresh b'sakana, and he's having a heart attack, and you have to drive him to the hospital on Shabbos so that they can do an angioplasty, or they can open up his clogged arteries. Okay, that's what's called a refuah beduka. It's a refuah b'derech hateva. It's a natural way of treating things. It's science. It's medical science. So even though that may involve chil Shabbos, but to save a life, medical science is mutter. You want to cure this person? Why? That you want to give a kvittel to a Rebbe, and the Rebbe should daven? So, not that we question the kayach hatfila, but that's what's called a refuah derech nes. It's a supernatural refuah. It's not a natural refuah. Even if you wanted to give the kvittel to Reb Chanina ben Daisa, who the Talmud was known as a Baal Neifes, it still would be mutter. So Reb Shlomo Kluger was, and we're going to see, he was Eish Lahava. He was mamish a bren fire. He was fired up by this which he held was a halachic travesty, to be Mechal Shabbos, to employ what's called a refuah derech nisi, or refuah derech segulah. You know, we talk about all sorts of segulas. You know, if you want parnasa, so you make a shlisel challah. It's a segulah for ashiras. All sorts of segulas. Today, you know, there's a whole new proliferation of segulas. You know, whether they are effective or not effective, that's not the point of this year. But they all work supernaturally or mystically. So to employ a type of refuah which is mystical, which is derech nes, which is derech segulah, which is a supernatural, and to be machal Shabbos, chas v'shalom, says the Reb Shlomo Kluger, you're not allowed to do that. So let's have the shir naftali, but just so that you shouldn't jump out of your skin. Wearing a kameya, the reason it's mutter is because you're wearing it. You're not being machal Shabbos. You're not riding it, and you're not doing malachas with it. You're allowed to be yetzi b'kameya because it's called wearing. You know, kameya that is machi gavras, machi kameya. But what Reb Shlomo Kluger means over here, and he says that it's poshet, that you cannot violate Isurim to employ a refuah which works shalei al pi derech hateva. He's alluding, Rabbi Yissocher over here, to a famous Rambam in the Parish HaMishnayos. The Mishnah in Masechta Yuma, this is in the last part of Masechta Yuma. Misha achsa bulmas machilas afil dvarim tveim. Misha noshri kelev shaita. If a person was bitten by a rabid dog, so there was a refuah called a refuah skula, which means a mystical type of treatment for being bitten by a rabid dog, to give the person the liver of the dog, which means you kill the dog, and then you take out the liver, and you have the person who's bitten by the dog eat his liver. Now, the liver of a dog, Rabbi says, obviously, it's a davar tameh. So the Chacham said, you cannot do this, because this is hocus pocus, this is derech skula, and you can't go ahead and eat the davar tameh based on because of some kind of hocus pocus. Rav Masi ben Chorish Matir. There's a Mandomer in the Mishnah named Rav Masi ben Chorish that holds that you're allowed to. That you're allowed to use this because it's a segulah. It's a segulah to cure the rabies. As they zot the Mishnah, a machlekes between the Chachamim and Rav Masi ben Chorish. Now everybody agrees, Rabbi Yisai, that we do not paskin like Rav Masi ben Chorish. We paskin like Chachamim. You cannot feed the person the liver of the rabid dog by which he was bitten. So the Rambam explains why. Ve'ein halacha Rav Masi ben Chorish. We do not paskin like this Mandamar. Why? Shechitir lahakel sa'odam b'yom tzom kippur yeseres hakovin shelakel sheitim nashach. Rav Masi ben Chorish not only was matter for you to eat the liver of the rabid dog, but even on Yom Kippur, which is not only a davar tameh, but it's mamish on Yom Kippur. Zach the Rambam Farvos, b'nei she'ein amoyel ela b'derech segulah. Because Rav Masi ben Chorish, this whole refuah was a segulah, which means it was supernatural, it was mystical in nature. V'chachamim oimrim ein oivin al mitzvah ela b'ripui b'lvad shel davar barer shahahigayin v'hanisein ha'poshet b'chayven esein. The Chacham say you are not allowed to over on any Yisr except with a type of medicine which the Rambam calls Shehu B'derech HaHigayin, which is logical, which is sensible, which is scientific. And experience tells us this works. To employ supernatural means, mystical means, it's a school that this works. No, why? Because their efficacy is weak, and science and experience does not prove it out. That's how the Rambam learns the machlokes between the Chachamim and Ramasim and Chorash. So the Rambam says, Mefurish, you're not allowed to be over any Isser in the Torah to provide refuah for any individual, even if his life is at stake, if the refuah is not based on science and experience, but it's based rather on derech segulah or derech nes. Azay pasach the Rambam. Now, we're 12 minutes into the Shir Rabbi Yisai, and you're still wondering what on earth does this have to do with parshas korach. The answer to this, Rabbi Yisai, is that l'chayra from parshas korach we see fakert. How is that? Because after the incident of korach, there was a magefa, there was a plague that struck the people. The Rebbe Shalom was very, very angry with Klal Yisrael. There was a magefa. So Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron, how do you stop the magefa? He says, you go ahead and you take ketairos, which usually is burnt in the Beis Hamikdash, the incense, and go through the camp with the ketairos, and the ketairos will ward off the magefa. Says Rashi, where did Moshe Rabbeinu get this from? Zok Rashi over here in the parsha, that was zeh masaloi malach hamaves kishaolo l'rakia shahaketeiros eitzer hamagefa. That when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shamayim to get the Torah, so the malach hamaves told him a secret, and he says, if you ever have a magefa, if you ever have a plague, burn the ketairos, and that wards off the plague. So here it is, Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a magefa in the camp. People are dying, they're dropping dead. Moshe Rabbeinu tells Aaron, take ketairos, v'sim ketairos, and go b'sech hamachna, and stop the ketairos, and the taka worked. But the problem is, how is Moshe Rabbeinu allowed to do that? Because the ketairos, Rabbi Yisai, can only be burnt in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Mishkan. So you want to tell me, hey sis, it's pikuach nefashis? For pikuach nefashis, we're not there everything? But Rabbi Yisai, this is a classic example of a refuah that works derech segulah. There's no scientific connection between burning incense, burning ketairos, and stopping hamagefa. No, what is it? Was that the Malach HaMoves told Moshe Rabbeinu there is this magical, mystical, supernatural power to ketairos, but you're not allowed to do that because the Beis Hamikdash. So according to the Rambam Shita, that you're not allowed to employ any supernatural means to cure somebody or to stop a magefa if it involves any type of isser, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's heter to burn the ketairos outside of the confines of the Beis Hamikdash? That's the connection of Beisai to this week's parsha. Now, we're going to answer this kasha. But in order to answer this kasha, Rabbi Yisai, we have to understand the aforementioned Rambam and the Pirush and Mishnayos. The Rambam says clearly, you're not allowed to employ any type of refuah that violates any yisr in the Torah if the refuah is not a naturally, scientifically proven way of being a rabbi person. Again, for the last time, a refuah derech nes, supernatural, a refuah derech segulah, mystical, supernatural, You're not allowed to use to cure somebody if it involves any type of issur. The Shalom Rabbi Yisai is, what's the pshat in that? Why is that so? Is it because it doesn't always work? And therefore, this whole business, it's a segulah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I don't know what the percentage, what the statistics are, but it's because it's not well defined, it's not normal, it's not natural. So it's okay, you do a segulah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So the reason you're not allowed to do it is because I'm going to be over on an issur, on a chance, on a whim. I'm going to give a guy on Yom Kippur to eat the liver of a mad dog because there is some kind of segulah, there's some kind of tradition that this works. So I'm not allowed to do that because I'm not allowed to go ahead and take this, which is only, as the Rambam's lashon is, that it's kikaycham cholus, because their power is weak. Is that the pshat in the Rambam? Because this is not, it's not proven, it doesn't work, or it doesn't work, most of the time. Is that the pshat in the Rambam? Or is the pshat in the Rambam that even if you have something, a segulah, something that's supernatural, something that's mystical, even if its effective rate is 90%, but as long as it's not derech hateva, you're not allowed to be over on an issur for any type of refuah that isn't derech hateva, the derech hanisai. You hear the shaila in the Rambam. Why does the Rambam say that you're not allowed to use a refuah derech segulah? Because it's not effective? Or even if it would be effective? But the Gidrei HaTorah, the halachas of the Torah tell us that the Torah has to work. We don't employ nisim. We don't employ nisim to cure people to be over on Yisurim. And therefore, even if this has a great track record, but the Torah is not matter this. The Torah is only matter when it's normal, when it's natural, when it's scientific, when this is contemporary, when this is medical science. The truth of the matter is, it's really totally where the dogesh is in that Rambam. Is the dogesh when that lashon of the Rambam which I read to you, ki koicham cholus, is because it doesn't work. It's shvach. It's a shvacha refuah. It's a shvacha segulah. Or because it's eino mitzad hadas v'hanisayin. Because it's not scientific. The nafkamina Rabbi side, that these two tzodim, is our case over here with Moshe Rabbeinu. When the Malach HaMoves told you, whenever you burn keteris, it cures the mageifa, you can take that to the bank. Because the Baal HaBos Alein, the Malach HaMoves told you, this works. And if Moshe Rabbeinu is going to employ it, it's certainly going to work. So there was no question, Rabbi Yisai, that burning the keteris was going to stop the mageifa. So if you tell me that the whole problem with using non-traditional ways of medicine, segulah medicine, nace medicine, is because of efficacy, because it may not work. In our case over here, it's going to work. The Malach HaMoves told him it's going to work, and whatever Moshe Rabbeinu does, you can trust it's going to work. He has a cure rate, Moshe Rabbeinu, of 100%. But if on the other hand you tell me it's not important efficacy, it's not important because it may not work, it's because the halachas of the Torah are built on derech hateva, not derech nace. And if you want to employ a nace and it violates the laws of the Torah, you're not allowed to do that. If that's the case, we still have a problem. How is Moshe Rabbeinu allowed to do that? That's the nafkamina Rabbi say. How to understand this Rambam? What does this Rambam mean? Because skula refuas are koichem cholish, because they're shvach, they don't work, or it's because it's just not natural. And if it's not natural, then I don't care whether it's effective or not. You're not allowed to do it if it violates Yisur. So this, as you would suspect, Rabbi Yisai, happens to be a machlokes v'achronim how to understand this Rambam. The Birkei Yosef from Rabbi Yissocher David Azuloi, the prolific Sephardic Pesach, writes in the Birkei Yosef or Achaim Siman Shin Aleph Sif Cotton Vo the following story. Ma'aseh b'ish echad shemotza segulah achas b'sefer ksav yad mi'adam gadol harishonim l'mi sheshasa sam ha'mavis lichtev lei. There was a fellow that found a segulah in a sefer that was written by the Rishonim, that if anybody ever swallows poison, you write this segulah, you write this kvittel, you write this kameya, and the person will be cured of the poison. How does this kvittel work? It makes the person vomit. So the person ingested poison, he writes the kvittel, puts it on the stomach, puts it in his ear, puts it in his mouth. Lo and behold, the guy vomits, he spits up the poison. This is a forerunner of syrup of ipecac. Right? Makes you throw up. The take of making order v'chaysel b'riusay. V'ira kama pom she's a narrow mar nefesh b'kasei shosasam ha'movet. And it happened that people who were desperate people would try to kill themselves. They swallowed poison. So they called this guy, V'zehi ish kasev kameya zu. He wrote this kameya, he wrote this kvittel, he wrote this amulet. V'osev hitzliach. Shehiki oisei hivriyu. The guy Mamash had a great tracker. Every time somebody swallowed poison, they went to this guy, he wrote the kvittel, he threw up, and lived to tell the tale. Vahi hayayim, Leil Shabbos Kodesh, Irish and Ari Yisraelish Shasasa Sam HaMavas. Friday night, a Yiddish girl went ahead and swallowed poison. Veschilu lo dirke misa, and she looked like she began the throes of death. They went to this guy, but it's Friday night, it's Shabbos. They call the Kasav HaKameya La Nara. He wrote the Kameya on Shabbos. The Tekev Hikiya V'Om Dalburya. And it worked. She threw up, and she was fine. Uv'yem HaShabbos Noida B'Yir Korach and Nasa. So, next morning in shul, you come into shul Shabbos, Luvas Herzach, well, you're not going to believe this, this girl swallowed poison, the guy wrote the kvittel, she threw up, the law Salah HaMedina Shechil Shabbos B'Shat Nefesh V'Kosa V'Nosam B'Yada. So they said, the guy's a Machal Shabbos. He wrote on Shabbos, a Malacha Deraisha. V'Hush Heishiv, and this Yid answered, the Pikuach Nefesh Deicha Shabbos. So what are you talking about? Till Shabbos. I saved her life. Pikuach Nefesh is Deicha Shabbos. So of course Rabbi say, this was the rage in shul the next morning. So that's the shaila that they sent to the Chidah, Birkei Yosef. What's the shaila, Tali Rabbi say? It's Mamash Tali how to understand this Rambam. Does the Rambam mean that any time you employ something that isn't natural, whether it works or doesn't work, you're not allowed to be over an Avera to do that? If on the other hand you say that the Pshat in the Rambam is because this is not effective, because it's a segulah, well, this guy has 100% track record. Every time he writes this kvittel, it works. That's the shaila. Zoch the Birkei Yosef v'hinei lefum rihato hayanira dalav shaper ovad. The man who wrote the kvittel on Shabbos to secure the girl did not do correctly. The half al gav the halacha ravochach machal Shabbos b'shvil chedesh ishbis akona lasas le refuah. Because even though we all know the halacha that pikuach nefesh is deicha Shabbos, mikol makayim hainu dafka refuah shu derech teva. That's dafka scientific, natural, normal forms of refuah. Ava bedover shu derech segulah. But to implement some cure that works derech segulah, then he quotes the Rambam, which we've been quoting, And he says that's what the Rambam means in the Pirush HaMishnayis by Chatzar Kavod Shelo, by the case of the mad dog. Umashma, then he says the Afal Gav Dein Safik Beskulazu. So the Chidah learns Pshat, the B'ki Yosef learns Pshat in the Rambam, that the Rambam is of the opinion that even though there's no Safik, that the skula will work. Shekvar Huksek Shavari Tail. Because this guy has a track record that it does work. Afilu Hachi, nevertheless, Kol She'enei Refuah Derech Teva Asru Chachamim Lava Al Das Mishum Refuah Derech Skula. Because that's the halacha. You're allowed in Machal Shabbos to employ scientifically proven medicine, but you're not allowed in Machal Shabbos for school of medicine, no matter what kind of track record it has. Therefore, we can extrapolate for our case over here. Kihaf name of the Nusa Kedais Machoishes Kesik via Megana Matza Misamada Musa, even though the person is effective, Mikomokan Kevin Shahu Bederach Skula, since it's not natural, since it's not scientific medicine, Ein Lakaisa B'Shabbos L'Chal Shabbos B'Malacha Kumur. Tad Kan Lashon Achida. That's how the Chida understands the Rambam. But Rabbi Yisai, we're halachically sophisticated enough to know that this is the type of thing that other Achrayim argue, and do not understand the Rambam like that, and understand that the reason the Rambam rejects the refuah of Masya ben Choresh to give the person the rabbit liver is because it's cholish, because it's shvach, because it's ineffective. But if you have some kind of segulah that is effective and it's proven effective, and this person is a mumche to write such kemei, such segulas, enochinami, even the Rambam would hold you allowed to do that. Among the poskim that say this is the Tiferes Yisrael and the Mishnayos and Masechta Yuma. Is mashma, that's how he understands the Rambam. The Stei Chemed brings several achronim that agree with this as well. On top of that, the Rishonim that Bichlal argue with the Rambam. And they say that that's not in the Pshat in the Mishnah. And in fact, the Rashba and the Ramban and the Masechta Yuma argue with this Rambam and say there's no such rule in Shas, there's no such rule in Halacha that you cannot employ refuahs which are derech skula if it works. And if it works, you can be Mechal Shabbos, you can be over on Yisur. The Birkei Yosef continues. Ochein Reisi laharav admas kodesh. Shekosav b'nidaini shari lahachal tarnagelas nevelish uskula l'shait. Again, there was some kind of skula that if a person eats a treif of chicken, it will cure his mental illness. The Hoichiach Shom, the Admas Kodesh proves over there, the Haran, Ramban, the Harajva, Pligi al Harambam. They argue, V'lei shayni lon bein refuah derech skula l'kashi b'derech refuah b'teva. There is no such distinction in halacha between medical science, between refuah science, or skula refuah. Because of the Hilchos HaKavasayu. And he paskins this Admas Kodesh like the Ramban and the Rashba. The Birkei Yosef himself says, Iver the Tzorach Lamed Yofel, Levar Das Ramban Rashba. So, we have over here, Rabbi Yisai, a fundamental machlokes harishonim. Number one, how to understand the Rambam. And in fact, whether the Rambam is correct at all. So again, getting back to our kasha, if the problem with derech skula is because it doesn't work, then in the case of Meish Rabbeinu with the Keteris, there was no problem because we knew it would work. But if in fact you learn like the Birkei Yosef himself, that the Birkei Yosef is of the opinion that the Rambam Shita is, and that we paskin like this Rambam, is if the pshat in the Rambam is that even if it works and even if it's effective, but if it's not al pi science, al pi nisayon, it's not al pi normal experimental science, you're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to be yoyv and aveira. So then, was the pshat with Moshe Rabbeinu and the Keteris? So the Orach Chaim Rabbi Yisrael over here on Chumash, and this week's parsha answers this pashat. V'tam vayikach hu kasher diber Moshe perish al pi novi v'yamei novi kishiyomer lav al mitzvah achas mitzvahs haTorah l'fisha ke'elio b'har HaKarmel. Very simple answer. And it's because Moshe Rabbeinu said to do it. And there's a concept in halacha called hayro ashah, that a novi is allowed temporarily to abrogate any of the 612 mitzvahs of the Torah, with one notable exception, and that is Avodah Zarah. If a Navi tells you to worship Avodah Zarah, then no matter who he is, we don't believe him. But anything other than Avodah Zarah, no matter if it's an Isur D'Oraisa, if a Navi tells you to say, I'm temporarily abrogating the law, you're allowed to listen to him. The classic example Rabbi say to this is Elio Bahar HaKarmel. There was a Beis Hamikdash. On the Beis Hamikdash is Kayim, you're not allowed to bring korbanos outside of the confines of the Beis Hamikdash. And Eliyahu, he went up to Har HaKarmel and he challenged the Nevi Abal and he said, let's have a contest. And he brought a korban and Eish came down in Hashemayim. You're not allowed to do that. The teretz is Eliyahu HaNovi was a Novi Muchzak. He was a well-established Novi, and the halacha says that a Novi temporarily is allowed to abrogate any halacha in the Torah with the exception of Avodah Zarah. Zochtar HaChaim HaKodesh Kasher Diber Moshe Pirish Al Pi Novi V'yamin HaNovi Kishiyomer Lav Al Mitzvah Achas. You're allowed to listen to a Novi if he tells you to violate an Isser. Lefi Shah, if it's temporary. Ke'elio Bahar HaKarmel. That's the answer to the kasha. So the answer is either, if we hope that the Rambam Shita is that if it always works, you're allowed to use derech neis, derech segulah, or the answer is, if the Rambam Shita is, it doesn't make a difference, the answer is, Moshe Rabbeinu made an exception to the rule, and the Navi is empowered to do that. But in the fundamental question, Rabbi Yisai, of are you allowed to use schoolless, refuah that are schoolless, and to be machal shabbos, lahalocha l'maisa, are you allowed to do this? So the Shoel Umeshiv from Rav Yosef Shol Halevi Nottenson, who also wrote multi-volume sefer called the Shoel Umeshiv, which are thousands of tshuvas. The Shoel Umeshiv writes the following Maisa. V'uvda Yadana Be'ir Meiladati. In my hometown, Zalochev, Shahaya Chayla Mesufim. There was a person that was deathly ill on Shabbos. V'hitir loy dayin echad liftoif mivraka yidei akum b'Shabbos al hadayin HaKodesh marash mibels. And the dayin paskined that you're allowed to send a telegram, Ayidei Akum, to the Sar Shalom Bells, the Belzer Rebbe, that the Belzer Rebbe should daven for him. Now this is not as drastic as the aforementioned case, because here it's mashma that they sent a telegram, they sent it Ayidei Akum, they didn't travel. But the dayin paskin, you can do this. And then he says, the Shalom Esha says, V'hagayin Reb Shlomo Kluger, in that aforementioned tshuva, Reb Shlomo Kluger, here he sholach ma'oid, Pasalas hadayin ilahay reisai. We'll soon see the loss in the tshuva, and the Shlomo Kluger went ballistic. V'gam kveid hagayin hakodesh hanal, Nisrayim alav ma'oid al kach. And he says the Belzer Rebbe was upset by this. Now listen to this. V'omar, the Belzer Rebbe said, Achshav ani muchliu hisamitz b'chol kaichi lahavi refuah l'chayla shlo yigarm chol Shabbos al yodi. So he says, now I really got to cure this guy. Because if I don't cure the guy with my tefillas, then it'll come out that there was chol Shabbos. So the Belzer Rebbe had angestrengt and he davened, and the guy was cured. As he sagt die Shalom Eshev. That's the Shalom Eshev's opinion. And he says that B'di Eved, Shalat Sarah Chayla, Yesh B'Sakana, L'Mamini B'Tzadikim, Yesh Loimer Shemuter, L'Hem L'Shlech L'Tzadik B'Shabbos, telegraph, She'Yispal L'Aleim. He says you can send a telegraph. Now again, that's not it's Ayidei Akum, so it's not a Deraisa. But he was the Shalom Eshev says there's a mochum to be makel if you believe in the power of the tzaddik. So at the other end, based on the equation, the end of the tshuva. Remember, we began with this tshuva from Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, in which he said over the Maisa. Although he said, I don't know if it's the same story, but he said over the Maisa that the person wrote the K'mei on Shabbos, that was one Chol Shabbos, and they traveled on Shabbos. Chutz L'chum, that was a second Chol Shabbos, and they used horses of Jews, which is another Shvisas Behemtoi. So Reb Shlomo Kluger writes and he says, Soif Dover, HaMeira Hazel Chol Shabbos Bekamet Dvarim. This Pesach was Machal Shabbos. And therefore, if this Pesach gets up publicly and said, I made a mistake, if he will admit his mistake, okay, then fine, he can continue. But if this Pesach, who is not for all this Chol Shabbos, sticks by his guns, then I'm telling you, and he was a great Sarov of Shlomo Kluger. He says, I'm now proclaiming that anything that this guy paskins is wrong from now on in the future. And you're not allowed to be semech on it for any psak. And I will not rest until this guy is removed from his position. And then he writes, Hashem Yedea, and Rebbeinu Shalom knows, this is not me, this is not an ego, this is not personal, it's nothing personal. I'm doing this not lichvaydi v'loy lichvayd ab beis abba, but I'm doing it l'man Hashem. Because I hold that this guy was machal Shabbos, b'tama chilulim. And if he has charata, then fine. But if not, I'm not going to rest until to make sure that this person's psukim are never relied on again. So that Rabbi Yisai is this machlokes between different poskim how to understand the sheet of the Rambam. That which the Rambam says that we cannot employ the segulah refuahs where it involves Yisurim, is that because of their lack of efficacy, or as the Birkei Yosef understands it, Rabbi Shlomo Kluger understands it, nothing to do with efficacy, even if it's 100% effective, but because it's not al pi derech hatefa, it's not natural, it's not al pi medical science, we're not allowed to be evad Yisurim to employ such refuahs. The pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron, so Rashi quotes over there, that's an interesting comment from Rashi. Rashi says, Anu ein lanu ela Hashem echad, orein echad, v'teira achas, u'mizbeach echad, v'kayin gadol echad. Rashi is trying to dissuade the 250 people together with korach from trying to pull off this stunt. And Rashi says the Umas Ha'olam may have a variety of priests and a variety of different hanhagis, but anu ein lanu el Hashem echad. We only have one Ribbono Shel Olam. Orain echad. We only have one Orain. Torah achas. We only have one Torah. We only have one mizbeach echad. We have one Kohen Gadol echad. And therefore, your thoughts of challenging the Kahuna Gedola are going to end up in futility. So I saw an interesting kasha. Saka right, you look at the Beis Hamikdash, you looked at everything in the Beis Hamikdash as one menorah, one mizbeach, one orain, one shulchan, etc. There's only one problem, and that is there are two kruvim. The kruvim that stood on top of the orain, the cherub-like figures, they were two. So how does that fit in with this concept that in the Beis Hamikdash there's only one orain, there's only one shulchan, there's only one menorah, there's only one kohen gadol? What about the kruvim? So the Ger Rebbe, the Beis Yisrael, says, and he comments and he says that the keruvim symbolize achdus as well. Because even though there are two of them, but it's Pnei and Mishal Achiv. They have to face each other. And therefore, says the Ger Rebbe, in spite of the fact that they're two physical units, but they're really just one. Because Pnei and Mishal Achiv. So I saw a Haysof in the Sefer, which I think is a beautiful Haysofa. The Kruvim Rabbeis are attached to the Orain. What's in the Orain? The Orain is the Torah. There's one thing that is the big Ma'ageh, the big unifier. And that's the Koach HaTorah. That the Kruvim are considered as one is because they're attached to the Orain. The Orain is Torah. If there's one item in Klal Yisrael that can be mechaber, disparate, and different personalities and different types of people, it is the Orain HaKodesh. It's the Torah that's munach in the Orain. You know, I recently said somewhere that I made the point that as much as we like to tell ourselves that we're Am Echad, but the truth of the matter is, there's a lot of fractious people. And even within the Orthodox world, the frum world, there is a lot of division and divisiveness. You know, we have different philosophical and hashkafic issues with different people, which is legitimate. But what is not legitimate is that because of those differences, we tend to become intolerant of each other. And you see that there are different people from different types that occupy different places on the Orthodox spectrum that will have nothing to do with each other because of these philosophical differences and the intolerance that breeds. So I made the comment recently that it's been my experience that there are three areas, and no matter where you stand on that Orthodox spectrum, you can come together no matter where the different people are from. Number one, Rabbi Yisai, is business. People that have to do with business with each other, so you can have a Chassidish Yid, you know, in the entire Levush, and you can have a guy that's a Harvard-educated, Kiprasru guy carrying yarmulke, that they barely can have the same language. One speaks a broken English and one speaks a barely broken Yiddish, but somehow or another they get together. But when it comes to business, they can be the best of friends, and they can trust each other implicitly. You know why? Now, Geschäft is Geschäft. Because business is business. The other area which I have seen with my own eyes, that people who normally would not even bother acknowledging each other's presence, is in an emergency room or in a hospital surgical family waiting room. And I've seen that you have different people, again, from diverse backgrounds, different modes of dress, different hashkafas, but where they're there together in an eis tzara, so they're agudim batzara. They're united because of their tzaras. And they will daven for each other, and they will support each other, and they will cry on each other's shoulders, both figuratively and literally. And the other area where I see that people from such diverse backgrounds can come together is what for me is the most prominent memory of the Siyam HaShas. And that is that when they're Messiah Shas, you can see people dancing together who again would have nothing to do with each other normally under normal circumstances. Because Torah is the big unifier. Because Torah is the big magid. And for sometimes only for brief moments or for several hours, the people feel connected to each other simply because we learned the same daf or we signed the same mesechta and we feel that bond. I find like also in society that there's one common denominator that binds together all types of strata of society. You can have wealthy people, you can have educated people, you can have truck drivers, and you can have neurosurgeons. But there's one thing that's magging them together, and that's sports. You can have two guys that again, this guy's in the overalls, he has grease under his, what's his name, under his nails, he has a beer belly and he's swinging beer, and he's sitting next to a guy, who's there with his BlackBerry and his $600 Italian suit, and they're sitting in a ball game together. These guys would not say boo to each other, but here they are, they root for the home team, and they trade ha'aris, and it's the great unifier. Sometimes when I'm on a train or a plane and I have to speak to the person that's next to me, so they don't have that much in common. But a face, but sports can read in sports. I don't know. So lahavdil, anu amil and v'heim amil. For them, the great unifier is the sports team. For us, the great unifier is the Torah. So the kruvim, that even though they were two bodies, since they were attached to the Oren makes them one. The second Har HaBais I'd like to say over, I saw written in the name of Rav Shneir Kotler Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. Parshas Korach is an extremely difficult parsha to understand. What led Korach to do what he did? If my memory serves me correctly, I think I heard Rabbi Weinberg on several occasions say that he felt that Parshas Korach was the most difficult parsha in the Torah. Here, Korach is when the Nesei Ha'oraim, he was a chosh of a person. He was, and yet he literally brought destruction upon himself and a couple hundred other people. How do you explain that? So Shneir offers an explanation that many other people offer as well, and that is that Korach's motivation was ironically came from a good source. It was misplaced, but it was a good source. And that source is that Kina Seifrim Tar B'Chachma. We know that competition in Torah is Mar B'Chachma. If you have two bachrim in a shir, and one bachar says, "I'm going to know this mesechta, backwards and forwards," so his friend will also be motivated to do that. Kina Seifrim Tar B'Chachma. What Korach wanted over here is he wanted greater closeness with the Rebbeinu Shalom. The problem was that he was a Levi and Aaron was a Kohen. The Kohen is Oved Bifnim. The Kohen does the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash itself. The Levium are relegated to a secondary role. They are the Shayarim, they're the one that close the doors, they're the Meshayirim, the one that's sing during the Karbanos. But they're not on, if you'll pardon this Zushtal, they're not on center court, they're not in the middle. They're not as close the Levium aren't as close as the Kohanim. This was behind Korach's motivation. That I want more. I want to become closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom. His fatal mistake was that a Kohen is a Kohen and a Levi is a Levi. We don't have time to go into what makes up a Kohen, the Twinas HaNefesh of a Kohen, the Twinas HaNefesh of a Levi. But suffice it to say is that different people are born with different koiches. The Rebbeinu Shalom has, in fact, a role for them to play. But the answer to this question of I want to have a more prominent role, the answer, says Rabbi Schneider, is the attitude that a person has to have is in order to get the job done, different people have to do different roles. And any person that does his particular role and he does it faithfully and he executes it to the best of his ability, so the Rebbeinu Shalom is as happy and as satisfied with him as he is with the Kohen. The Levi that does his work be'emunah, the Levi that does his work with Mesiras Nefesh, with devotion, in terms of his kirva to the Rebbeinu Shalom, in terms of his closeness to the Rebbeinu Shalom, is beduyuk like the Kohen. This is the mistake that Korach Vadase failed to understand. That you can achieve that closeness doing the role that the Rebbeinu Shalom set out for you to do. And any person that completes that role and does it be'emunah is as choshev to the Rebbeinu Shalom as the next person, even though he had more prominent or glorious role. So Rav Schneider tells through and he says, and if you have a siddur in front of you, it's good to look at the siddur, look at this pasuk. If you look at the shir Shahalavim Hayoim Beveis Hamikdash, you look at the shir from Monday, Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach. This is the Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach. So there's a pasuk in here, a beautiful pasuk that I never really paid attention to. But the pasuk says over here, the pasuk says, Diminu Elokim Chazdecha Bekerev Heichalecha. Diminu Elokim Chazdecha, we thought, Lashon Dimyan, we thought that your chesed, Rabbi Rebbeinu Shalom, can only be bekerev heichalecha, can only be inside the heichal. But we're unfortunately relegated to outside of the heichal. Now we see, Keshimcha Elokim came to Hiloscha al Katzvei Oretz. Now we see that even the Katzvei Oretz, the ends of the earth, we can still have that kirva. That was our mistake. Diminu Elokim Chazdecha, we thought that your chesed can only be found bekerev heichalecha. But the Bnei Korach now realize, the Bnei Korach loy nesu. Keshimcha Elokim came to Hiloscha al Katzvei Oretz. That your tehillah, your praise, can even be found the Katzvei Eretz. This is the answer to the Bnei Korach. So the Sefer Bechia brings someone, I don't know who it is, he says a chaver of his made a very interesting ha'ara. The Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach, that we say on Mondays, Yom Sheni. What happened in Yom Sheni in Ma'aseh Bereishis? What happened was that the Rebbeinu Shalom split the Mayim HaYonim and the Mayim HaTachtainim. He split the waters. It was the first time in the history of the universe that there was a split, there was a chalukah. There were waters that stayed up with the Rebbeinu Shalom, And there's waters that have to come down here that formed eventually the oceans. And they had tinus. They had tinus on the Ribbon Shalom. You're relegating us to be the Gulf of Mexico. And then, meanwhile, these are the waters in Shamayim, they're mamish next to you. What did Ribbon Shalom say? No, that's the way it is. There's a chalukah. And he says, eventually you'll have your kirva to me as well. But your role is to do that. So that's why b'diyuk and b'dafka, the shir mizmor lifnei korach, is on Yom Sheni. The day that the Ribbon Shalom tells us that you can be up in Shamayim, you can be down here on earth, you can still achieve kirva Elokim. Finally, Rabbi said at the end of the parshas, when the Ribbon Shalom wants to be ma'ames once and for all, the kahuna and legitimacy of Aaron, so the Ribbon Shalom makes a nace that he takes, everybody should take a nata, that the persons whose staff will fluctuate, will bring forth fruit. That's the person that Ribbon Shalom deems to be the kain. So out of what fruit did the Ribbon Shalom pick? Everybody, we would have picked an apple, most common fruit. What does Ribbon Shalom pick? Shkedim, almonds. So the Rebbe Rabbunim says, Vayetze perach, first came out a flower, Vayetze tzitz, a blossom, and then Vayikmo shkedim. Cut to the chase. Who needs the perach? Who needs the tzitz? Get to the bottom line. The answer is that to produce shkedim, you have to go through the process of prochim, of tzitzim, and then you can have shkedim. Because that's the way life is. That's the way nature is. Not just bottom line. To produce anything, there has to be a process, and every part in that process is chashuv. That's the lesson they want to send Klal Yisrael. That you can do whatever your job entails, but you can achieve that kirva because at the end of the day you all participate in bringing forth the fruit which is the Ratzon HaBayvei.
This year was presented by Rabbi Yissocher Frand Shlita.